Hello everyone, Nathaniel Gavronsky here, and I want to talk to you about the history of St. Patrick's Day. Now this is going to be a brief history since St. Patrick's Day had been celebrated since the 9th and 10th century. Now before we start talking about St. Patrick's Day, we need to know who St. Patrick was. When did he live and what did he do? Well, starting off, St. Patrick was born in what year we believe is 390. He was born as Pallidus, and he was born as a Roman citizen. Britannia was what the Romans called the island of Britain and the areas that they controlled it. Now they did not control all of it. Scotland was out of their reach, and they never did occupy Ireland. Now, Pallidus was kidnapped at the age of 16 by Irish raiders who would come into the now abandoned Roman garrisons and kidnap young children and during their raids and take them back to Ireland as slave labor. So Pallidus became a slave in Ireland, and that was his first experience of Ireland at all. He was able to escape a few years later, during this process of his escape from Ireland, he got a calling from God that he was to return to Ireland and help convert the pagans into Christianity. So he would spend nearly the next 2 decades of his life learning and becoming a minister, a preacher, and a missionary. He would return to Ireland, and in order to convert the pagans into Catholicism, he did what was a common practice at the time, was to use the existing pagan traditions and holidays and use it to show an intrinsic value system on how they were really Christian holidays and how God was speaking to them through these symbols. How he did this was using the Irish clover to show how the Holy Trinity of the Holy Spirit, the Father, and the Son. He used this distinctive three-leafed clover to show that God was speaking to the Irish people. He also took what the Irish were already praying to, the sun, and incorporated it into what we now think of as the Irish cross. So when you see a Celtic cross today, you will see something that St. Patrick actually used to help convert the pagan Irish into good Catholics. This is not uncommon. In fact, Halloween, it was done at Christmas, our modern version of Christmas. Many, in fact, of our modern holidays, we started off with old pagan traditions throughout mainland Europe. And this is a common thing that happened over centuries, and it was no surprise to find out that St. Patrick's Day and how St. Patrick began to convert pagans into Christianity was done any differently. Now, St. Patrick would become a patron saint of Ireland. However, he was never canonized by the Catholic Church. So when he died on March 17th, 461, it was a number of years before he would become the patron saint, but because of a popular decree of the people in the area. This was common practice for this time period, and it was around the 9th and 10th century that the Catholic Church started putting on their calendar the feast for St. Patrick on March 17th, which was the day it was believed that he died in 461. Now, the very first parade associated with St. Patrick's Day had nothing to do with Ireland at all. It, in fact, took place in what is now St. Augustine, Florida, in a Spanish colony in 1601. Now, this celebration was because the Irish vicar, which was like a deputy bishop in the Spanish colony, organized a celebration feast for St. Patrick the year before. And in 1601, they held the first parade and celebration of St. Patrick, which was the very first one known of nationally in the United States or in Ireland. Throughout the early colonial period of the what is now the United States, soldiers that were of Irish descent or just Irish in general in the British Regular Army would have celebrations in New York and Boston starting around 1772. This was a few years before the Revolution, and even after the Revolutionary War ended, the Irish inhabitants of New York and Boston, especially the upper northeast, continued on with these celebrations. And in 1848, the very first attempt to have an official organized St. Patrick's Day in New York City was initiated, making the New York City St. Patrick's Day one of the oldest civilian-led parades, with one of the largest crowds of over 3 million in the distance of 1.5 miles. Now, for the most of St. Patrick's Day's history, it was a religious holiday. In fact, it wasn't even up until the 1970s where bars and pubs in Ireland allowed to even be open. And it wasn't until 1995 was this really utilized to be a drawing point for national tourism and celebration of Irish culture worldwide. The original color for St. Patrick's Day was not green. It was in fact blue. Green was kind of a more of a reserved color, and the Order of St. Patrick actually used blue. Everything was associated with blue and not green. The leprechauns, who actually had their own day, which was March 13th, were initially wearing red and black and had pointy hats, which more closely resembled what we think of as like yard gnomes today. It wasn't until later on that they start wearing green. Now the connection between leprechauns and St. Patrick's Day is basically because the pagan Celts had a belief system in fairies and little magical creatures, and the leprechaun's magical creature was spell power was luck. Now, luck is not intrinsically good or bad. It could go either way. When you were blessed with luck, it was no telling if it was to be good or bad. These mischievous little creatures, once green became associated with them, and green became associated with St. Patrick's Day. The reason why you have to wear green on St. Patrick's Day is because you didn't, a mischievous little leprechaun would come and pinch you. So that's where the leprechauns come in, their origin in general sense, and why green, why you have to wear green today. Now, why green started to replace blue as the color of St. Patrick's Day happens to come from a couple of different things. One, in the mid 1800s, you start seeing a push for Irish independence. There was also, the potato famine that happened in the late 1830s, earlier 1840s, that pushed a lot of Irish people out of Ireland, and they even blamed England at some point of causing the famine, even though the Queen of England did spend quite a bit of money trying to prevent the Irish from starving. The Irish flag even comes from this time period. In fact, in 1848, the French gifted what we now associate as the Irish tricolor with green, white, and orange to a gentleman by the name of Thomas Francis Meagher. He actually would later become a Civil War general for the Union Army, a brigadier general in the Union Army, and later become the acting territorial governor of Montana. This flag was raised during several of the uprisings in Ireland, but the colors stimulate the Catholics were known as having a green color. You know how the Soviet flag is red because the color red is associated as the color of the Russian people and has the stem of beauty, and red's the same classicity. Green has associated with Catholics and the Catholic Irish who rebelled and pushed against the Protestant, English, and the white was supposed to represent peace. This actually is directly connected to the French tricolor, where the blue was liberty, the red was the people, and the white was the burgesy family keeping away the liberty and the people from eating. So the colors, the tricolor is resembling from that. So when the French used the green, it was to symbolize the Catholics, and the orange was the Protestants, and for them the white was supposed to be peace. And this was trying to show solidarity with the Irish people, and green started being worn by the Irish independence movement as a sign that they wish to be Republican in a sense of non-royalist within the greater British cultural scheme. Now there is a banner slash flag associated with St. Patrick, and that is actually a white background with a red diagonal cross called a saltire. So basically, imagine a white field and then a red cross like this. This would actually be incorporated in the Act of Union in 1800, along with the St. George's Cross and the Scottish flag, to create the Union Jack that would later become the flag of the United Kingdom. Now, the red saltire of St. Patrick uh, got its origins in 1783. So there's a long history of these different flags and symbols being used in Ireland that weren't associated with green, but when the French and the independence movement of Ireland started associating green with the fact that they were Catholic and to be separate from Great Britain as a whole, in solidarity of this movement, you start seeing green being associated with St. Patrick's Day. Another really interesting thing with flags and St. Patrick's Day in the Irish and the British is the United States had a large Irish population. And when the Olympics were held in Great Britain, there's the opening ceremonies is a parade of flags. Well, the flag bearer was for the United States. When you're supposed when the nation comes across the leader of the country who's hosting the games, the flags are normally bowed down out of respect. But because most of the athletes were in fact Irish, they told the flag bearer that if he were to bow the flag of the United States to the Queen of England, that he would permanently have to bow his head, meaning his head would be removed. So the United States flag, because of this, does not bow at the Olympics and hasn't since. So there's a little bit of history between the Irish, the British, the color green, the flags, and St. Patrick's Day. There is a lot of little moving parts. But St. Patrick's Day is celebrated across the world as far as Russia, Singapore, obviously the United States, Canada, all over the Commonwealth area of Great Britain. It's associated with Irish culture and leprechauns and drinking green beer. The green dyeing of the rivers in Chicago happened early on. In fact, the first city to attempt to dye their river green was Savannah, Georgia. It did not work very well. They do try to dye the rivers in Chicago green. This is a long time practice of doing so. It's just kind of now a celebration of a large part of the American society, which is Irish. In fact, our police forces across the country get their origins in the Irish and Irish immigrants. In the Five Points in Lower Manhattan in the Bowery area, you had these Irish gangs, the Pug Uglies, the Dead Rabbits, and so on and so forth. If you watch the movies Gangs of New York, they'll start talking to you about these different gangs. These gangs were self-policing, which means if you were entering their territory, they policed themselves. So all these gangs were also the police forces. They were also the fire department. They were the community militia, if you will, and those militias were developed into the New York Police Department. That's why the New York Police Department, their flag is blue and green and white, and that's why they have the bagpipes and drums because of its Celtic heritage. And there's a lot of ties with Irish, the United States, and why St. Patrick's Day is much largely celebrated here in the U.S. than it is in Ireland. There are in fact three times more million people in the United States that claim Irish descent than there are actual people in Ireland. So it's a huge thing. Now, as far as St. Patrick is concerned, he always considered himself to be more of a Latin person. He wrote and spoke in Latin and referred to himself in the Latin form of his name was Patricius. So I think it's amazing how someone who is so tied to Irish culture is not Irish, never viewed himself as Irish, and really contained himself within the piety of his religion, and how we have, because of his dedication to the conversion of Catholicism for the Celtic people, that he became such a huge Irish symbol. He also never chased any snakes away out of Ireland. In fact, there have never been any snakes in Ireland at all. One, it's too cold for the time period that the snakes would have been able to slither themselves across the land bridge. It was too cold, and since it's now an island, snakes would never been able to get there. It is believed that this myth of St. Patrick playing a flute and marching all the snakes into the sea comes to the removal of paganism from Ireland in the conversion of the Celtic people of Ireland into Catholicism. So I thought that was really interesting. I actually, for a long time when I was a kid, believed that St. Patrick charmed all the snakes into the water with the flute, and that was taught in school. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people still believe it. Maybe people even in Ireland still believe this, even though there's not even a fossil record of any snakes being in Ireland. So that's basically the history of St. Patrick's Day, who St. Patrick was, his life, what he accomplished, and the modern day symbolism that we see today in the world from St. Patrick, and the conversion of blue to green for St. Patrick's Day, and how that all came to be. I hope everyone's enjoying their St. Patrick's Day. I hope everyone gets to enjoy some their favorite green beverage, if it be beer or a McDonald's Shamrock Shake. Until next time, stay healthy, stay wealthy, stay wise, and as always, stay classy.